Grammy made spaghetti for their supper, telling him, "It always used to cheer you up to have spaghetti, and I guess you need some cheering up after the day you've had." On the red and blue striped tablecloth, there was also a bowl of salad made with early greens from the garden the two families kept in their adjoining yards. The two little houses were so close together that if Max had looked out his grandmother's kitchen door, he would have seen the black shape of his own house where no light shone in any window. He didn't look. "Thanks, Grammy," he said. "I'm hungry enough, but I don't think it can cheer me up." "Well then, it can fill you up," she told him, twirling spaghetti around her fork. Grammy was now so matter-of-fact about everything that Max became curious to know what she might have been thinking of over the course of the afternoon. "You know what?" Grammy asked, as if surprised by her own idea. "They could have gone off the boat at Port Haven. They might be riding the evening train home." "Do you think so?" Max asked with sudden hope. Grammy thought about that and sighed. "I'd be surprised, given that note he left," she admitted. And Max had to agree. "We'll find out soon enough if that's what happened. Meantime, you'll stay with me," she said again. Max had done some thinking of his own that afternoon about where he'd sleep that night. The trouble was, his grandmother was bossier than you'd expect from seeing her soft, silvery hair worn up in a bun that kept slipping to one side or the other of her head, and her soft, grandmotherly shape in the pink and mossy green grandmotherly colors she liked to wear, the loose sweaters and long scarves, the full skirts that twirled around her ankles. However, if you noticed the bright blue eyes behind their heavy tortoiseshell spectacles, you wouldn't be at all surprised to learn that before she was a librarian, she had been a teacher and had some very bossy habits. And the only clear thinking he'd been able to do that long afternoon, Max had decided that he should live at home, which meant he needed to sleep. Which meant he needed to sleep that night in his own bed, in his own bedroom. He was a little afraid, which was ridiculous, but also true, and he didn't expect to get much sleeping done. But he had decided. Begin as you mean to go on. That was the advice he meant to follow. He wanted to be as independent as his parents said he could be. When she saw the expression on his face, Grammy looked sternly at him. "No discussion. No argument. You already have a bag packed." Max stuffed spaghetti into his mouth. He needed a minute to consider this. Considering it, he remembered. When he was just 8, the company had presented dramatizations of some Aesop's fables at all the schools in the city, and at the university too. One of these told the story of a stiff, proud oak tree that was broken in half by a strong wind, while a small, weak reed only bent under its force. Max had played the reed, his mother the oak, and his father the billowing wind. And so he decided that just for this one night, he would let Grammy tell him what to do. It would make her feel better too, to have him there in the house with her. "All right," he said, "just for tonight." "We'll see about that," she said. As they ate, they didn't talk much more than to ask for salt or the bowl of grated cheese. Only occasionally did they need to look up at one another. Over the years, they had had supper together countless times, at the same small table in Grammy's warm kitchen with its bright red cupboards and long soapstone sink, so they knew exactly what they'd see if they looked up. After a long, companionable silence, Grammy said, "So," Max looked across at her. "What do you think has happened?" "What happened is they've gone off without you." "Come on, Grammy, you know what I mean. What do you think is going on? You read that note." Max had had an afternoon and a spaghetti supper, too, to get somewhat used to his situation. "That note made no sense," Grammy said. "Maybe it made too much no sense," Max said. "Unless they planned all along to leave you behind," Grammy said. "Did you ever actually see your ticket? It was supposed to be waiting on the boat." "Maybe it was. But Grammy, Arabella and Banker Herman aren't even in the same play." "I know that," she sighed, and set her fork down on the plate. "I know that, and I recognize the Shakespearean lines. 'Eye hath not heard.' That's from A Midsummer Night's Dream, spoken by that fool who is magicked by fairies. But why did he use those lines? That play is about love and illusions. Do you think that's what the note is about? Love makes no sense, but it could be saying, 'This isn't the way it looks.' That would make it a warning. I think it's time you told me exactly what that invitation said, and exactly where it was from, and exactly who sent it," Grammy announced. She picked up her fork again. Max did not argue. He recited the contents of the Maharaja's letter while Grammy twirled spaghetti, chewed, swallowed, and did not interrupt with any questions. At the end, he reminded her about the brooch, and that was what she had something to say about. "I was already suspicious about that. So tell me, what did the harbor master tell you about the ships that sailed this morning? Where were they bound?" "For China and Australia and South America," Max answered quickly. He had made sure of that. None for India, but a boat going to China or Australia might be stopping at an Indian port, couldn't it? To reprovision, to refuel. So your parents are most likely on one of those, rather than the one going to South America, Grammy said. "For which I am grateful, because South America these days is nothing but little revolutions, one general trying to oust another." Max agreed with her deduction. Besides, the boat for South America was a cargo ship. But why have Flower of Kashmir tickets if there's no Flower of Kashmir? It could be this Maharaja just pretends to himself that it's his private ocean liner. People who have great power and wealth, they go a little crazy, in my opinion. They don't live in the same world as the rest of us." She thought some more, then reminded Max, "And your mother is right. They do always land on their feet. Imagine how they'd laugh at us if we called out the army and they were lounging around in the lap of luxury in a first-class stateroom." "You know what, Max?" she asked, sounding like her normal self. "I think we're going to have to be patient." "That's what he said, isn't it? Wait with your grandmother. We're going to have to leave it up to them. They know where you are." "Patient for how long?" "Long enough for them to get in touch with us. When they do, this will all make sense. Things tend to make sense, in my experience, unless," she smiled, "your parents have been struck down with amnesia." Max pointed out, "Amnesia is not contagious. They wouldn't both have it at the same time." "Exactly," Grammy said. "Or it could be, if someone is fool enough to believe in that fortune your father's always talking about. In which case, you'll get a random note, or a ransom note, unless they've been taken for some other reason. But what could that be? Who would need the use of 2 actors? It was supposed to be 3 actors," Max objected. He believed in that third ticket, whatever his grandmother might think. All the more unlikely to be kidnapping them, Grammy said. She asked, "Can you live with the worry?" She reminded him, "I know how hard that is, waiting and not knowing, waiting and hoping, waiting and imagining the worst. I remember." Max had always known that Grammy had lost her young husband to a sudden squall on the lake, that his boat had not been located for a night and a day, and that it wasn't until the morning of the second day of the search that his body had been found. Grammy knew what she was talking about. She said, "It's not easy." Max looked right back into those brave blue eyes and thought about it. He didn't know where his parents were, but he couldn't imagine that his parents were really lost. Gone for good. Not for good, he thought. It wouldn't be for good. It would be for bad, for very bad. He swallowed hard and held his grandmother's glance. "I can wait. I will." Grammy moved right on. "Not that we'll be doing nothing," she said. "I'll be doing research and locating passenger lists, itineraries, reading the newspapers. You'll be watching the mail, and also you should keep an eye on the theater, in case that was what somebody was after, although I can't think of why." Neither could Max. The Starling Theater was an old building in the old city, not convenient to the new town. The seats were almost always filled, true, but that was because of his parents. Any other company would have gone belly up years ago, his father maintained. "But we have your mother, who is a beauty as well as brilliant." At which pronouncement his mother would smile and roll her eyes at Max. "And we have me," at which Max rolled his eyes at his mother. Remembering that lightened Max's spirits even more than spaghetti. "Which leaves us with the question of what to do about you," said Grammy, fixing him with a stern teacher's gaze. Trying to match her sternness, Max told her, "I want to live in my own house," and reached out to serve himself green lettuce from the bowl of salad. "Is there dessert?" he asked, hoping that would distract her. With a grandmotherly smile to say, "You're not fooling me," Grammy allowed herself to be distracted. "How do you feel about baked apples?" she asked. "With custard sauce." It wasn't until they had done the washing up and were seated side by side in the parlor in front of Grammy's wood-burning stove, both pairs of stockinged feet stretched out toward the warmth, that Grammy asked for more details about what Max had learned on the docks that afternoon. Max reported, "Captain Francis actually saw them. He said they were just getting out of a closed carriage. They waved and looked happy, at least from a distance. Then they went off up the gangplank of a ship, too far away from the water rat for him to read the name. He said my father was wearing his long green scarf and a wide-brimmed black hat, and looked dashing. And your mother?" He didn't say. Max's mother didn't get noticed, unless, of course, she was on stage, acting, and even then it was her character, not the actress, that people remembered. He asked me why I wasn't with them, and I told him I was joining them in Port Haven. He believed me, Max concluded, pleased with the success of his lie. Grammy smiled. "That was pretty smart, Max. I don't think we should tell anybody. Not until we hear from them, assuming that we will. Not the police, not anybody else, either. We need to be sure they're safe first. If we don't know what's going on, we might put them in danger. If we tell the wrong person or involve the wrong people." "Since we don't know who the right ones are, or even if there are any. Agreed?" "Agreed," he said. "Then what about your school?" "Don't tell them," Max answered, so vehemently that she looked sharply at him. He explained, "It's better if the school thinks I've gone off with my parents. I don't want anyone to suspect that I'm living alone." He didn't look at his grandmother, who either didn't hear or didn't feel that she needed to argue the point. And besides, if I'm going to school, how can I earn the money to live on? I know you can't afford me, Grammy. He thought about this, too, during the long afternoon. His grandmother could live comfortably enough, she always said, on her librarian's salary, and she always declined the help her son-in-law offered. Thank you very much, but she had nothing to spare, Max knew. We could manage, she assured him, but weakly. Maybe it's lucky, after all, that your mother had such terrible morning sickness with you. I know you used to want a brother or a sister, but I'd never be able to support two of you. Grammy gave a little laugh. Still, it's a pity your father's famous fortune isn't in coins. Max recited the lines in as clear an imitation as he could manage of his father's rich voice. My fortune? My personal fortune? I break my fast each morning in its company. Grammy just shook her head. For some reason, maybe because they were talking about it together rather than trying to face it alone, both Max and Grammy felt better, not so shocked and frightened and powerless, more as if they had a plan. I want to work anyway, Max said, because how could you be independent if you weren't self-supporting? But I've only ever had my jobs with the company, and they're not any use outside of the theater, and the company is the only theater in the city. It'll be hard for you to find work, Grammy agreed. I can mow lawns and weed and prune hedges, I suppose. I can wash windows and clean a house. I could probably clean a business too, a bakery or a store, an office, he thought. I can hammer, but I don't know how to build anything. Not furniture or even a birdhouse. You can paint, Grammy reminded him. Max knew better. Even Joachim has trouble earning a living painting pictures. Grammy had gone back to thinking about Max's education. I can teach you history and reading. I know the books and writing too, and some science, and certainly geography, but I can't teach you mathematics. We'll have to find a tutor for that. Another expense, Max warned her. He finished his tea, suddenly tired. I hope it's not too long before they write. We'll be fine, Grammy announced resolutely. If she could believe that, maybe Max would too. Out of the window, in the little room he had so often slept in when he was too young to be at the theater with his parents, or traveling with them, Max could look down across the garden to where his own house lay, pale in the moonlight, its windows dark. He hadn't really expected to see lights in the windows and the silhouetted figures of his parents moving through the rooms, but he wouldn't have been entirely surprised either. After the day he had had, nothing would surprise him. Was this what it was like having an adventure? Because he was beginning to suspect that being independent on your own wasn't as easy as being independent with parents. Max slid under the blankets and pulled them up around his chin, as if they would warm him against the cold and anxious worries that filled the dark air around him.